Welcome. This is the Judges Workshop. I am your panelist, James Hippolyte, along with Amy Overington and Richard Perkins, who will rename himself from my account name right now. We are covering off what is a judge. And this first section we've called it evaluating versus judging. Now, imagine, if you will, an analogy from the Olympics. A contest judge is like an Olympic judge, whereas an evaluator is like the athlete's coach. Both are important, but the judge does not try to be the evaluator or coach. Let's extend that analogy a little bit further or elucidate upon that a bit more. When you are evaluating in your club meetings a speech, you are evaluating the speech, not the speaker. So you are trying to help the speaker by explaining what was good and what could be improved upon with the speech, and by various techniques, verbal, non-verbal. So in that sense, you're like the coach. You are helping them work the program and increase their skills. However, the Olympic judge, as well as the speech judge, are looking to see what is your current level of skills. Therefore, we are actually judging the speaker. And there are some objective standards that we're going to cover today. What I will show you is, I will share screen. Therefore, the purpose of evaluating is to help the speaker grow their abilities, whereas the purpose of judging is to determine a winner. What I'd like to do is, on the next slide, evaluating this role is open to anyone. It's a verbal evaluation delivered publicly. It is your subjective opinion. And you comment on what the speaker did well and how they could improve. And you do take context into consideration. Oops. And you cannot disqualify or fail the speaker. Judges, however, must meet certain eligibility criteria, which we will cover shortly. There is no communication with the speaker. You are to be objective, fair, and impartial because you are comparing two or more speakers. You are to judge according to the ballot form. And you do not take timing or context into consideration. That will be taken into consideration by the chief judge if the timer informs the chief judge that the time has been exceeded and therefore the speaker is disqualified. But that is not the judge's responsibility. That is the timer's responsibility. And the judge can lodge a protest that may lead to disqualification, again, based upon certain eligibility criteria. What are those eligibility criteria, I hear you ask? Thank you for asking. They are these. Let me scroll in. When you offer to be a judge for a club contest or area contest or division contest, district contest, and regional, quarterfinal, and semi-final, and world championship, which is possible, then you must be a member in good standing of a club in good standing. In other words, a fully paid member of a club that has a minimum of 8 members in order to be a club in good standing. It's low, but it's still a club in good standing who has paid their fees. You must also have had a minimum of 6 months membership. And, oh, this is old. This requirement has been removed. Having 6 speeches in the competent communication manual is no longer an acceptable eligibility criteria. Now it is only levels 1 and 2 of the Toastmasters Pathways Learning Experience. I'm sorry, I didn't proofread that I had the old eligibility form as opposed for the new one. Now, Alan is correcting me. Yes, it is for judging. So you can still have 6 for judging. All right, thank you, Alan, for correcting me. So this is still viable, this form. I was thinking for the speaker. The speaker must have level 1 and 2 for the international speech. And 6 speeches from the CC manual is no longer valid for the speaker. But thank you for correcting me. For judging, it's still relevant as of right now. They may remove this at some stage in the future because they're trying to wean us off the legacy system entirely. Thank you, Alan. At the International Speech Contest, if you're at the quarterfinals, the semifinals, or the World Championship, there are some other criteria which you can check out. For right now, I'm concerned with people learning about club and area for now. Judges for contests beyond the club level are not eligible to compete in the same contest type during the same contest cycle. All right, so that just means that if you are in, for example, the evaluations contest and you have judged at a club level, you can't be a competitor. You can't also be a competitor in that same speech type, for example, evaluations, for example. And that is a obvious integrity. You might be tempted to let a lesser person win so that your chance of winning against them is higher. Thanks, Joanna. Can you read that, Amy, and sort out that question? Judges' Code of Ethics. So uphold the 4 key values: integrity, service, respect, and excellence. Utmost objectivity. Do not consider the club, area, division, district, or region affiliation. You'll not consider the normal contestant's age, race, creed, color, gender, gender identity, gender expression, national, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, or physical or mental disability, and not time the speeches. And you will support by word and deed the contest judge rules and judging standards, refrain from public criticism of the contest, and only reveal your participation as a judge, your selected skills, and the ranking you assigned in accordance with the speech contest rules. In other words, the speech contest rules say they want you to destroy your ballots after the contest. They don't want people to know how close or how far apart the results were. And you're not a member of the same club as any contestant when judging at the division, district, region quarterfinal, semis, and finals. And you have no conflict of interest with any of the contests that would cause you to be biased. And then you sign that off. So that covers the difference between evaluation and judging. I'm now trying to learn how to stop share. There's stop share. And I will hand over for the second section, which is the International Speech Contest ballot form, to Amy.
Thank you, James. And I didn't quite manage to finish answering Joanna's question during the time that I had available to type, so perhaps I'll just answer it aloud instead. Joanna actually had two questions. One is that inevitably the judge is subjective rather than objective. I think the point is that we, as judges, we try to be as objective as possible. Of course, there's always going to be some kind of inherent thing within you. We are humans that make you subjective, but we really try to be as objective as we possibly can be when we're judging a contest. And then the second question from Joanna is around judging according to the ballot form versus potentially not having to follow the ballot form. Now, I believe that in the rule book, it now states that you should follow the ballot form. I can double check that during this session tonight and just follow up on that. But I think that that has not always been the case, but I believe it is now. If anyone has the rule book open, you can feel free to check that for me tonight. Otherwise, I will try to check it after I've finished running this next 15 minutes. Now, let's talk about the ballot form. That was a really nice segue from Joanna's question, actually. There's a different ballot form for each contest type. Those of you who have judged before will be familiar with this, and I know there are some quite experienced judges on the call today, but I'm going to pitch this at the level of new judges because I'm sure there are some of those here today as well. Today we're going to talk about the international contest ballot form, but once you've seen this, I'm sure you'll be able to understand the others, but just know that there is a different one for each contest type. I shall just share that on my screen now. Now, this is what the International Speech Contest ballot form looks like. So if you're a judge in a contest, you should be given a copy of this form by the chief judge. If you're there on purpose, in person, they should have a physical paper copy for you to have, so you'll just need to take a pen. If you're an online judge, then you might be emailed a copy, or you can always go to the Toastmasters International website and download it. So what we're going to look at is the different sections in this ballot form and talk about how we fill it out. Now, if this is the first time you're seeing this, you'll see that we have various judging items down the side here. Now, we do have on the reverse side of the form, we have an explanation of what each of these means. And I really do encourage you to go and read through all of these judging criteria. Don't only look at the front side of the form, look at the back side of the form every time that you're a judge and just remind yourself of what each of these different criteria means. Now, if we go back to the front side of the form, you'll also see that there are different sections here. So we have across the top here, we have space to type each competitor's name. Some people like to start at this end and fold the paper over as they go along. It doesn't really matter which way around you do it, but whichever way works for you. Underneath each contestant's
might be worth explaining a bit more in depth if you don't mind, Amy. I don't mind taking that. So I was taught this by an experienced Toastmaster, Neil Stitchbury. He writes contestant 1 in slot 10, and contestant 2 in slot 9, and contestant 3 in slot 8. And the reason he does that is that after he's scored contestant 1, he folds the right edge of his paper over and hides the score from himself, so that when he scores contestant 2, he's not being influenced by what he gave to contestant 1. So that's the reason why he chooses to do it that way. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, James. Yeah, some judges like to do it round that way. Some judges like to do it the other way. Now, down underneath each contestant's name, you'll see a slot to put in scores. We can give this person, say, a score of 15 in the speech development. Now look at these numbers here. We have categories for excellent, very good, good, or fair for each of these different judging criteria items. And each of them are worth a different amount of points. So you can see that the content, these three categories at the top, are worth 50% of the marks. The delivery is worth 30%, and then the language is worth 20%. So during a speech or in the 1 minute silence after a speech, we fill in each of these categories on the form, and then we add them up at the bottom. You can take a calculator if you are not very quick at your adding up, or if you're doing it online, you can always copy and paste from Excel, but do try to add up to the right number, otherwise you'll be influencing the results in a way that we don't perhaps want. The bottom part of the form here is a really important part of the form. So this is where we write who we have judged to be first place, so the person who got the most number of points that we added up, who got second place, and who got third place. We must sign the form, and it can be done electronically through this form if you're doing it online, and we must print our name on the form. Really important that we fill in first place, second place, and third place, unless there are fewer than 3 contestants in the contest, of course. But we don't give any ties. We have to put a name in each of these 3 places, and we have to sign the form and put our name, otherwise it won't be valid. Now, what I'm going to do in a moment is post this ballot form in the chat, and we're all going to have a chance to practice. So if you are quick at printing, you might want to print it out. If you have 2 screens, you might want to do it on your own screen. Or if both of these things are a little bit difficult for you to do right now, you can just think in your head, and what I'll do is put it on the screen at the same time as a speech is on the screen. So you can just watch the speech and think through how you would judge it. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and sort out whether or not I can actually post this in the chat. Let me just have a go at this. Bear with me, it always takes longer to post stuff in the chat during a Zoom meeting than what we think. I've managed to post the entire contest kit there, so you have all the forms now. That is taking a little while, so you should be getting it through in a moment. Right, while that's coming through, I will show a video of a speech. This is a contest speech, and we're going to watch that together. Afterwards, we'll do 1 minute of silence, the same way as we would do in a normal contest, so that you can all think through how you would fill in this judging form. Right, ready to go.
Have you ever been told to stop acting like a child? Well, I have. Madam Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters and guests. John Bradshaw, American author, has described children as natural Zen masters because for them, every moment is a new experience. And Bradshaw's words got me thinking. The amount of time we constantly try to impart our knowledge and learnings on children, and like tiny little sponges, they soak it all up and let it in. But do we ever stop to think what we can learn from children? Because I believe children have this, it's an innate capacity to teach us adults, we simply forget. And if, like me, you don't have children, you can still learn by observing children. And today, I'm going to share with you 3 of my most powerful teachers. I will introduce you to Hannah, Porrick, and Kevin. I'll share some of what I've learned from them and how I believe it has made me a better Toastmaster. Hannah, age 7. She has taught me the power of living in the moment. Because when Hannah is playing, she's totally focused on what she's doing. She's not worrying about what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow. And I remember one day looking out my window, she was running in the grass looking for ladybirds. She wasn't looking to see who was watching her or what was happening. She was just enjoying it. And you know, it got me thinking, if Hannah was entering a Toastmasters contest, she would just enjoy every moment of it. Because she wouldn't be worried about what everybody is thinking. She'd just embrace the whole experience. And to me, that's really powerful, you know? So then, Porrick, age 4. Porrick has taught me to believe in myself. Because that's exactly what he does. I remember one day watching him. He was building Lego, building a castle. And I was watching it, and it was good, you know? And I went to him and I said, "Whoa, Porrick, that's brilliant." And he turned to me and he just said, "Yeah, I know." He didn't need me or you to tell him that he did a good job, because he believed in himself. Again, this got me thinking, if Porrick was in Toastmasters and entering a contest, what would he do? Well, I believe he would get up there, he would stand in front of the audience, he would speak from the heart, because he believes in himself and in his message. Finally then, Kevin, age 3. Kevin taught me the power of literally keeping going when I just wanted to quit. And I remember when Kevin was learning to walk, and he'd wobble, and he'd fall, and he'd get up, and he'd cry, and he'd fall again, but he kept going. And what came to my mind was when I did my icebreaker speech a few years ago. And now, it wasn't the best, to be honest. But in true Toastmaster style, I got feedback. I got lots of encouraging feedback. But I also got growth points and suggestions for improvement. But at that time, I looked on those suggestions as negative. And I decided I didn't want to do another speech. Just, that was it, give up. Then I thought of Kevin wobbling and falling and getting up again. So I went home, I got out all my feedback. I read through it all to see what I could learn from it. And Toastmasters, that learning is what has me standing here today. So I introduced you to my 3 most powerful teachers, to Hannah, Porrick, and Kevin. And I think from what you've heard, you can see how much I've learned from them. Like, think of Hannah. She'd go up doing her speech and she'd walk up into the room. She wouldn't be looking around. She'd embrace the experience and enjoy it. Porrick, again, he would come right up. He would believe in himself. He would speak from the heart because he believes in what he's doing. And Kevin, well, with his determination, he would keep entering the contest again and again until, yes, until he won it. So my message to all of you here today, When you're doing your next speech, when fear takes over, when self-doubt envelops you, when you feel you can't do it, just stop and think, what would that little child you once were do? And the next time somebody accuses you of acting like a child, embrace it. Because I believe that everything is possible when we see it through the eyes of a child. Madam Contest Judge.
It was brilliant. I can see your lips are moving.
Thank you, James, for reminding me that I was on mute because I had my screen shared. My configuration was different from normal, and therefore I didn't look down to see the unmute button at the bottom. What am I doing here? Right,
Cool.
so think through how we judged it. Here's one I prepared earlier. What I'm going to do is talk through how I judged the speech as one judge. And then I'm going to ask Richard and James to talk through what they did differently from me to judge this speech.
Okay.
Now, for me, I looked at what I normally do is make a couple of notes kind of in my head during the speech, but I normally only fill in the form after the speech in the 1 minute of silence, because I always think, well, I can't judge speech development until the entire speech is finished, and the same applies for all of these. Now, the areas of the speech that I thought were really good and warranted a mark in the high very good column, I thought the speech development structure was good. She talked about the three people, she had parallel stories for each of them, and each of those points related back to the message that she was trying to give in the speech. So I gave her a pretty high score of that, 17, which falls in the middle of the very good section. Another section of this that I thought was really quite good was the correctness of language. I think I noticed one grammatical error, so I didn't give her perfect points, but I gave her 9 out of 10 for that. And then the other areas that I thought should probably fall in the very good column, but towards the lower end of that column, were the speech effectiveness. So she got a couple of laughs from the audience, so we can see that there was interest and reception there. I felt that she achieved her speech purpose pretty well, but I didn't think she was really exceptional in this area. So I gave her 11, which is at the lower end of the very good column. For the physical, I also gave lower end of the very good column. I felt that her gestures were mostly natural. She was using the stage, but there was a bit of movement that was not very purposeful. So I didn't think that she was exceptional in that area. Same with her manner. I thought she was nice and direct. She was speaking in a self-assured way, but there was nothing really exceptional about it. So I gave her the lower end of the very good. And then the other judging criteria items that I haven't talked about yet, I thought those were all kind of okay. There was nothing that I put down at this lower end in the fair column, but in the good section, I put the speech value. I thought it was good enough, but it wasn't really an exceptional speech. She had some original thought, she had some good ideas, and she used logic, but there wasn't anything really stand out for me in that area. I thought her voice was pretty good, but nothing really exceptional there. And her language appropriateness, yep, she used appropriate language, but I didn't think she made any really interesting word choices or anything like that. So that's how I chose to judge this speech. I will now invite James for any comments on what he thought similarly or differently from me regarding how he would have judged this speech.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. So what I've just learned is that Amy is an excellent hard scorer and I'm an easy scorer. I thought that maybe I was biased towards her Irish lilt, and I gave her I got from the speech a little bit higher on all of the areas, so that whereas what were you, 70?
I gave 73 in total.
Yeah, and I had 86, so 13-point difference. I was impressed with the different areas. So in the high, very good in just about every area. The voice really struck me. So that is interesting. And looking at a question from Joanna, I'll reply to Joanna's question verbally. So Joanna has asked, I usually actually make notes on each speech as she does when she's evaluating, using the judging criteria as she's listening, so that when she comes to allocate the points, she can recall. And this also helps when listening to lots of speeches in a row. And she's asked for our comments on this. And when I read that, Joanna, my immediate reaction is I don't have time to make notes during a 7-minute speech and write my numbers and sum my numbers in the 1-minute silence. So good on you if you can. But for me, as I'm listening, I am picking a number, and it's my gut feel based on the guide. So that's another point from that Ellen has been making, is that you have to use the ballot. You may or may not use the guide. Is that what you're trying to say? You're pretty sure she said you don't have to use the guide, but you do have to follow the guide. Yeah, there's a distinction. That's an interesting distinction. So, I mean, if you can take those into consideration, it's an overview, right? Delivery is 30%. So here's delivery. And it's 30%. It's those 3 10s. So if you think the delivery is worth 30 out of 100, I gave her 25 out of 30, right? So maybe that was a bit high. All right, that's me. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, James. And I'll now ask Richard to comment on anything that was similar or different in the way that he judged his speech versus James and me.
Amy, would you share your screen for me, please? Your judging form for me, please.
Sure.
I want to just comment on things because yours and mine were a bit more similar. Just one thing, I don't like it when people give me a judging form with the criteria on the back of it. I prefer to have the criteria in a separate form, side by side. And I tend to look at things. For example, in speech development, they would say must have a significant conclusion. So those are sort of the words that I look for. Or when it comes to voice, there should be a pitch variation from one level to another. And to read those sorts of criteria does give me a good guide on how to score. I do admit I also take small notes in mine, but mine are often, I use a plus or a minus. Quite frankly, I use a plus and a minus, and I just use that as the introduction could have been good or better, and then I was like minus. And these small things, as the way that that help me. I also use letters: E for eye, H for humor, V for voice, and things like that when I judge. So I have little bits of notes and ideas to go with it. Usually I judge at the 5-minute to 6-minute mark, excluding speech development, knowing there's a conclusion to come. And why? Because will it be more effective in the last minute or not? And if it is, instead of giving it 7 points, I might go up to 8 or 9. But the last minute usually does not change much unless they have a significant conclusion, a great joke, or, which I really appreciate, an exceptional moment, an emotional moment. So Amy's speech development was 17. I would have given that a 15. The effectiveness, I would have given it a lower mark of 10. Speech value was good. Physical, I was happy with voice. I prefer James's version because I thought her voice was quite excellent, and the Irish thing doesn't add to it or take away from it. And I guess when you do hear the old Irish voice, it's a good voice to listen to. But in fairness, and not being unbiased to those who have different tones that I do, I don't listen to where the voice comes from, but how the voice is used. As for correctness, she did do it well, but I thought 9 points was a touch on the high mark. I gave 6. So my total score was 66. And I do say that even though I do the judging at the 5-6 minute mark, it's easy then to just modify the mark. And if 2 marks are close together, that judging score is not the final answer. I could have, if Amy had 73 and 75, it's up to the gut feel as to, at the end of the day, which speech was better. It's only a guide. The 73 mark speech could have been better than the 75 mark speech, and sometimes I do change and give the 73 mark person the higher place. Those are my comments that I'd like to provide. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Richard. Now, hopefully, all of you will have come up with 2 conclusions while you have been listening to the differences between how I and James and Richard judged this speech. And we didn't collude beforehand, so don't worry about that. Now, one conclusion is that we gave different numbers down the bottom here, but at the end of the day, it's not the absolute number that makes a difference, because we don't normally share this top part of the form with anybody. All we share is this bottom part of the form here, which says who came first, second, and third. So if James gave his 3 contestants 86, 85, and 84, and I gave mine 73, 72, and 71, we may still have judged them in the same order, and so we would still have the same names down here. The second point that I'd like to make when talking about the differences between different judges is that hopefully you can see that this is why it's important to have as many judges as possible. And in fact, the rule book specifies the minimum number of judges required for each level of the contest. Because you can see that if we had, say, only 2 judges in this contest, we might have had very, very different results from each other. Whereas the more judges we have, the more likely it will be that the total, when all the judging forms are added up, is more, the more likely it is that it is more accurate and a fairer result. So it is, even though we're not talking about the process for organizing a contest here, some of us may have been involved in organizing contests, and that is why it's important to have so many judges. Now we are running a little bit behind time, but I did see there was a raised hand, but it seems to have gone down again, so we won't worry about that. But I will, in that case, I will hand back to James.
Thank you, Amy. There is one last point I would make about the judges form, which I hope is not really required, but I'll state it anyway. It's not good practice to score the first speaker 50% on purpose with the hope that you will then score everyone else around that first speaker based on their relative merit. That isn't fair to the first speaker. It is better that you score the first speaker according to what you think they were, and if it was high, it's high, and if it's low, it's low. But don't make it 50% on purpose so that you can be relative for all the rest of the speakers. Thank you. All right, my next section is tips from experienced judges. And for that, I've got video clips. Yay! So I will share screen quickly. Share. And I will hit go on the PowerPoint. Go. And, sorry, when I shared, did I share sound? Let me just make sure. Share sound. Okay. Now I'm sharing sound. Now I'm ready to go.
Computer. So thank you, Coral, for agreeing to this. The question before you is, what is one thing you would like judges to know?
Thank you, James. It's very hard to choose one thing for judges to know. But the first things that come to my mind are that judges are there to pick a winner, and to pick a winner by only using the criteria that is given to them. So therefore, I think it's really important that before the contest day, the judges go through the ballot and make sure that they understand the ballot, what it is saying, and not imagine other things. They've made the ballot there for a really good reason. I think that when you are listening and deciding what you're going to be putting on that ballot paper, you must approach it with an open mind, not have any set ideas in your mind at all. And the other thing that I think is extremely important about judging, about anything to do with Toastmasters, is that we have 4 core values. And whatever we're deciding within a judging context, it must be considering the 4 core values as being the most important part of the judging.
Thank you, Coral. I'll pause it there. Computer.
Greetings, Toastmasters. I'm Wendy Whitcliffe, District Director for District 112. James Hippolyte, our Program Quality Director, asked us district officers to provide some judging tips. I have 3. The first is when you are challenged by maths. A good idea is when you're trying to add up all of the numbers, is think about adding 2 together, add the third to that, and so on and so on. So a bit of a picture behind you. My other tip is to consider not choosing difficult numbers. So maybe a 5, a 2, or 8, as I've done in my example. But be fair to your contestants, so think about the range. And the third tip, if you are judging online, there is a variety of Excel judging worksheets that either your division director or I do have copies of as well. Here's a quick example of an Excel spreadsheet. Makes adding up very easy. So that's my 3 tips. Thank you.
Hello, fellow Toastmasters. It's Stephen Budai, your immediate past district director, and I've been given the task of coming up with 1 tip for judges. I can't give you one. There's got to be more than that. And I know that Wendy and Coral have already as well. I've had many, many years experience in sport, so I'm going to bring a sporting aspect to it. I spent 17 years dishing out yellow cards and red cards and blowing a whistle on the football field. And the players always said to me, Stephen, or Mr. Budai, when I was refereeing, we just ask for consistency. If you're going to be tough on us, be tough on us for the second half, not just the first half. And the other thing they also wanted and needed and expected from us also was that we had a knowledge and full and comprehensive understanding of the rules of engagement. That is the current contest rulebook. Guys, if you want to play fair, don't come up against the yellow card or the red card, because I'll blow you off the stage. Enjoy the contests, because I know the judges will be fair and will give the best results on the day. Back to you, James.
Yay. So that was the best of us giving you some judging tips. Oh, and I will now quickly go to the next section. Is Richard is presenting on in-person versus online. Welcome, Richard.
And there I unmute myself, and now I'm going to share my screen, in person or online. Here's the first slide of 3. And I thought about number 1. You can all see that, I'm hoping?
Yes.
Good. So they're in room, and judge on the top left is a blue person, and there's an in-room contestant, a blue person. Then why is number 1 a hybrid contest? So I smiled at myself and thought to myself, well, it could be that the 3 who are not in blue are not in the room, whether they are contestants on the judges on the left-hand side or the 4 on the right-hand side. So the reality is there are 4 scenarios for where a judge could be in or out of the room, or where a contestant is in or out of the room. Now, I do know that we have to go hybrid in our higher contests, but for the moment, we're just speaking about club contests. I have no problem with the situation, but I do want to make one comment on it. And that is that a person in the room can feel the speaker speaking. You can, and I think feel is the right word, the emotion, the tremor on the person's lips, the way he even breathes and has a quick sigh or something, you can pick it up. Whereas on a screen, you can't. And that does change the way someone judges because you are experiencing it differently. Again, I suppose, as Stephen now said, whether you're in the room or outside of the room, all the contestants are before you. You might have different scores as to those outside, but be consistent across the board. So let's go to my next slide, which I would like to do this one. If you are outside the room, absolutely important, give your telephone number to the chief judge. And sometimes when forms are not going easily around and you're battling to send something, even a text message to the chief judge as to your number 1, number 2, and number 3 are important. I recommend that you put first name, second name, and that is a nice way of doing it. It does avoid confusion. So your ballot form, well, as I do it, I prefer to start the judging process a wee bit earlier so that the ballot form is ready earlier. But it is it's just a way of that I use, and it's been working for me. Now, speakers in the room, well, if you are at home, close the doors. Just give yourself the peace and the quiet. Have a glass of water ready, a pen or 2 to stand by and work with so that you can do your judging in as a responsible way as possible. Now, what happens if the internet goes off for 2 speakers and you only get back on a bit later? Well, you've got a problem. What's going to happen is the chief judge will not be able to accept your ballot because you're not judging all the contestants. So that is one of the issues you have. So with internet reliability, make sure the kids are not playing games outside, stopping your internet. Keep everything away from internet possible situations that's going to cause you trouble. You don't want trouble. And then lastly, video quality is usually an issue. So judge the speech and not the quality. And as far as the person is online, I think it says for itself when it says avoid bias towards the person, whether they are online or in person. It's just, what does a speech sound like to you at that moment? And again, the word consistency comes up. From left to right, regardless of how well they speak or how clearly it comes through, just do your best. I think none of us can really put ourselves down to a flat rule. You're supposed to hear every single word. What I do think what matters is consistency and credibility. And when you have your judges in front of you, you trust your judges as a chief judge. You've chosen them, and they are going to do their job as best they can. And I think this is one of the most important things that we as Toastmasters are. We are real people, we are honest people, and we're going to do our best to do our job and present a winner to the chief judge. Back to you, Mr. Program Quality Director James. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Richard. All right, so this is now the Q&A section verbal, and I've just discovered I can actually allow participants to talk, attendants to talk. So if you have a question or a statement you wish to make at this stage, please raise your hand and then I will push the talk button and then you can participate. Please bear in mind we are recording and there are going to be other members watching this video afterwards. So hopefully your questions are engaging and relevant and other good words while I'm waiting for someone to raise their hand? Or even the panelists. Is there anything that we haven't covered, or any item that bears extra strength? Otherwise, we are possibly going to finish in 1 hour.
I guess one thing that we didn't cover was the tie-breaking judge's role, which is, as far as the judging itself is concerned, is very, very similar to what any judge would do, except that their form is very slightly different in that they need to rank every contestant, not just the top 3. And also their form will be privately collected by the chief judge rather than being handed to the ballot counter. Have I left out any differences between a tie-breaking judge and another judge?
The tiebreakers judge's ballot is only used in the case where the normal judges have a tie.
Yes.
So, and that
However,
tie could be for any number, could be first even, or second even, or third even, or whatever. The tiebreaker will break the tie. So whichever one the tiebreaker made higher is the one that gets the extra +1 and becomes that placeholder.
yeah. However, the only people who need to worry about that are the chief judge and the ballot counters. The judges themselves don't need to worry about that. Yeah. And I guess that brings us on to a point as well that we, in this workshop, we've been focusing on the role of a judge. We haven't really covered the chief judge role or any contest organisation roles. I'm sure that there will be other contest workshops at some stage that will cover some of those, but for this one, it's been focusing on judging only.
There is a support for the chief judge in the back of the contest book, which you can go. There are checklists there for the contest chair, what they do and what their responsibilities are, as well as for the chief judge's checklists. It's on page 25 of the brand new book, June 22 to June 23. And that's where you'll have a bit of support as a chief judge. They don't judge. They just listen to a big bang outside, take note of where it took place in the speech, and can talk to it if there is a protest or a problem. Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing that the earlier point about taking notes during the speech, and so thank you, Joanna, for raising that, is that the chief judge at the club level is often asked to give the winner a mini evaluation after they've won. Okay, so after they've won and they're going to go forward to the area, the club can ask the chief judge, do you have any tips? So at that point, you can do a mini evaluation, give them a CRC, for example. That is not part of the rules. It's not encouraged or discouraged. It's just become a practice that is sometimes done. And there's nothing against it in the rules. So definitely, if you've taken notes during the speech, you have something that you can talk to, because you don't know who's going to be number one at the end. So if you've got notes for each speaker, then you will be able to help the first place winner with that.
Yeah, the recommendation is that the contest must be over so that then the tips can be given, not while they are outside counting.
True. That's what I intended, yes.
Yeah.
Any other hands up? Any other points raised? So cover the chief judge's briefing. The chief judge's briefing, when I've been chief judge, is here are the rules. You've read the rules. Be fair. Be impartial. Here's my contact details if you're online, so that you can email me your ballot. Here's the speaking order, if you know it in advance. You should be. Technically, they should tell you, so that you know during the order, so that you could fill out that part of the form before the contest even starts. That doesn't often happen. What else? Now, there was a recent, that's right. There was last year, an incident arose where a person was referencing other speeches or other contestants, or yeah, and that's a definite no-no. So if there is something like that happening, then yeah, the chief judge can bring that to mind to the judges. This is something. Oh, that's right. The person was basically regurgitating a news bulletin. So with zero original thought. So zero original content. And so that person was disqualified. So it's appropriate for the chief judge to remind the judges about the rules that state that the speech should be substantially the speaker's own work. Question from Max. Is it common for a chief judge to offer comments on the speeches after the awards have been made?
If they want to.
50%?
Mm.
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
I'd say this is only common at club level. Beyond,
Yep.
yeah, I don't think that I've seen it beyond club level before, and certainly not in all clubs either.
No.
Right.
Yeah, its main purpose is to give some support back to the club, give them an idea of, for example, we had a evaluation contest. It's now a different contest, but nobody used the words in conclusion or made any form of conclusion. And at the end, we said we couldn't score you any points on the conclusion part because you never had one. So that's something for you to remember in the future. It's a general comment. It's not a specific or a personal or a why you became second and not first kind of comment that we got to avoid.
Absolutely can't to have that conversation. Correct. If anyone raises their hand, I'll let you talk. If anyone wants to contribute to the video. Okay. Do we have a Google form? Did that get done in the end? That was going to be Wendy. I think.
I did not see one. I was looking for one too.
So sorry. We were going to ask for feedback on this workshop. Instead, let's wrap it up. So that's 60 minutes instead of 70 minutes. I appreciate your participation. I hope that this has been valuable, that for some of you it will be a reminder. For some of you, it may well be the first time you've been taught what it is that a judge does. So in summary, you are judging, you're judging the speaker, you are not evaluating the speech. It is a different mindset from a speech evaluation report. You're being asked to be consistent, unbiased, and fair as much as possible. You're being asked to not take into consideration the medium, whether it is in person or online, and you're not being asked to look at the time. Leave that to the timer. That's not your consideration. The practicalities of filling out the form, there's various techniques around how in that 1 minute to get sum your numbers so that you're not delaying the contest any more than absolutely necessary. Any other summary points from the panelists?
Yeah. Thank you for all those attending. Thank you very much.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to end the recording there. Oh, 2 more questions have come through. Prefer a Zoom meeting, not a webinar, so we can respond to direct questions. Fair point. Max, thank you, Alan, for that question. Max, thank you, James, Richard, Amy. Good to get a perspective on how other people assess a speech and some strategies for scoring. Many thanks. Thank you, Max, for that feedback. And Margaret, thank you for an information session. Lovely. All right, and end recording.